Hey guys, so what's going on? So today in this video we are going to be talking about the lures that I like to use for other species other than bass. I mean, you guys know I love using big baits for bass and stuff like that. Well, today I don't think the camera's pointed at me right. There it is. Hopefully it might be right. Anyway, let me check something real quick. Okay, so today in this video we are going to do two more shout outs, just like I said in my last video. First shout out is going to go to Musky Hans. He makes ice fishing videos, and he makes really cool videos, and ice fishing for walleye, bluegill, panfish of all types. Pretty good videos, pretty good channel. Next channel, and the reason why I'm giving this channel a shout out is kind of because he told me basically how to link stuff down in the description, and I will have a link to both these channels in the description down below. And I didn't even know how to do it, and he actually told me the steps how to do it. So the channel that did that was Game Boy 4, and make sure you guys go check out his channel. I will have links to both channels down below in the video description. And if you do want to be shouted out, you're the first two people who ask for a shout out. Say like, if somebody asks, say, hey, can I get a shout out? If you're one of the first people to do it, I'll give you a shout out in the next video. So yeah, set that over there without breaking it. Hopefully I didn't hit the floor. Okay, so like I said, this video is going to be talking about some of my favorite non-bass fishing lures. Now, a couple of these are meant for bass, but I've caught panfish, crappie, and other stuff on them, so I figured I'd throw them in here anyway. Now, there is 10. I made sure there was 10. I actually have 11, but the other one is kind of the same thing as this one here, so I didn't really care to show the same thing twice. So, number one is something. Now, a couple of these are stuff that you probably can't really get anywhere. These here are really cool little minnow things. I actually found these in a bait shop way up north in a town called Martinsville, Illinois. Some of you guys may have heard of that town. I don't know. It's not the Martinsville like with the racetrack, but it's just a small little town, and it had like a hardware store, but it was part fishing tackle store, and it actually had so much cool stuff. It had river to sea water ploppers. It had live target baits. It had baits, more baits than most of Walmart's I've been to. But yeah, I found these here. These here are teeny tiny. You guys can tell from the size of my fingernail. They are tiny, tiny little minnows, and they are super cool. I've caught bluegill, crappie, bass, red ear. I've caught, what was the other fish that I caught? Oh, I caught rock bass with them. One day I was actually using this. Basically, I was fly fishing with it. I would pull out line and then cast it, and it was a lot of fun. I was catching bass, I was catching bluegill, crappie, and they're really cool to fish with. They basically have no action. They literally have no action, but if you just take this, cast it out, and reel it real slow on a weightless presentation, it's just the coolest thing, because then bluegill and crappie will just smash it. And I've caught a lot of fish. Actually, my personal best white crappie was caught on this, so it definitely catches the fish. Next is another cool little bait. This here is one that I actually used in a former video. It's an old video. It's titled Surprise Catch or something like that. It's an old video. It was way back when my camera was sideways. And it's this little thing here. This is actually the same exact worm with the same exact jig head. It's basically just the tail end of a worm with a tiny little jig head. And it literally is probably one of the most simple baits, but it will catch a bunch of bluegill, and it'll probably catch crappie and trout too. But that's basically all it is. Next is something that is meant for bass, but I've actually caught crappie, or I've not caught crappie, I lost a crappie, and I caught a bluegill with it. And I've seen people catch bluegill and crappie with these, and it's actually a tiny chatterbait. This little bitty tiny, like 1/8 ounce chatterbait. I've actually lost a crappie one time. It's probably about a pound crappie, and I actually caught a bluegill with this thing one time, and it is a pretty cool bait. It's got a big trailer on it because I'm using it for bass, but if you put a smaller trailer on it or just leave it like that without the trailer, you'd probably be able to catch bigger bluegill and crappie with it. But yeah, a little Z-Man chatterbait. Next is another bass bait that I've modified into bluegill bait, and I've actually caught one crappie with it. That's the only fish I've caught with it, but it's a tiny little underspin. You guys can see the tiny little blade there with a little jig head and then a little paddle tail swim bait. These actually come with a Alabama rig, and it's like a 3-prong Alabama rig, and these here come with it. And I've actually been using them without the Alabama rig and putting other stuff on the Alabama rig, and these here are pretty good. I've caught bass and a single crappie with it, so pretty good little bait. Next is something that I actually found, and what was crazy about it is at the time I was fishing a really hard to fish for bass lake, and so I found these bluegill beds, and I was looking around for these bluegill beds, and I actually found this sitting on the ground, and the paint in the eye of the hook was still in it. It was not taken out yet, so it hadn't even been used. It was just sitting on the ground. So I picked it up, and the very first cast I used with it, I actually caught what at the time was my personal best bluegill, and that's this little dude here. Little red head, white eye with a yellow tail, little hair jig. This here is a pretty cool bait. I've caught bluegill with it. I don't think I've caught any crappie with it, but I know I've caught bluegill with it. Next, these two here are actually, hang on a minute, I got a few more here. This one here is actually a pretty cool bait. It's a miniature, tiny little crankbait. You guys can tell by the size of my thumb, it is quite small. And it's got these tiny little micro trebles on it. It's a Strike King, Mini King, no, that's not what it's called. Bitsy Minnow, that's what it's called. Little tiny crankbait. I've actually lost bluegill and crappie on this thing. I actually haven't caught anything with it, but I did miss and lose a few fish on it, and they were both bluegill and crappie is what they were. Next is an inline spinner, and I actually have two different variations of it. This one here is the old rooster tail style. I mean, these things work for everything. I think that every predatory fish alive goes for these things. I mean, I've seen people catch peacock bass with them, bluegill, crappie, bass, stripers, musky, you know, some of the bigger ones, pike, walleye. I mean, these things are just, they're staples of fishing. Not just bass fishing, just fishing in general. And then the other variation I have of it is this tiny little inline spinner with a minnow on it. It's a little soft plastic minnow with a little golden blade, and then it's got a small treble hook down here. And now I actually have two different sizes of these. I have a bigger one, and then I have this tiny one. And this tiny one, I haven't gotten a chance to use it yet because I bought it like in October, so I didn't really have much of a chance to use it. But I have caught some bluegill on the bigger one, actually. I think I've caught 2 bluegill on the bigger one, and I caught a lot of bass with it. So I think this one here is going to be really cool. It's made by, I think it's like called Musky or something like that, and I bought it at Walmart for like $1.20 something. Pretty cool little bait. Next is something that I think everybody, no matter how long they've been fishing, has probably used these. I've used them before, back even way before I started bass fishing. That's the little beetle spin. This one here is a tiny little beetle spin. It's got a little double tail, little black and yellow double tail with a little bitty blade. And honestly, it's probably one of the oldest lures there is that has been catching fish forever. Next, last but certainly not least, I've caught a lot of fish on these. I've caught rock bass, bluegill, and crappie, and I know they work for bass, but I do know they work for crappie and rock bass really well. And I just dropped it. Let's see if I can find it. There it is. And that is the little tube. The little black and white tube is probably my favorite color, with a little little tiny white jig head. Really good bait. I've caught a lot of fish on that. So I hope you guys like this video. Make sure you guys go check out the channels. I will have the link down in the description to both those channels. Make sure you subscribe and comment if you haven't already. Wait, I said that backwards. Make sure you comment, like, and subscribe if you haven't already. We got 277, I think, the last time I checked. So getting close to 280. Hoping we can get to 300. You know, there was somebody in, not my last video, but my video before last, who said, it was actually the guy, one of the guys I shouted out in this video. He said that he predicts that I'm going to hit 300 by February 27th. So if you guys have any predictions of when I'll hit 300, leave them down in the comments. I'm hoping that I'll hit by February 17th. I think that's where my goal is. I got a week. I think it's a little bit tight, but I do think it might work. So I hope you guys like this video. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already. Bye-bye.